bill would authorise doctors to provide a lethal substance for people to kill themselves with.
I'm against this bill because I worry that the mere existence of the process of assisted dying will make the vulnerable more vulnerable. It will change fundamentally the relationship between a patient and a doctor.
We risk engendering a feeling of guilt amongst elderly people and those with serious disabilities that they are a burden on their families, on their carers or on society.
I feel that the right to die will very quickly become the obligation to die for the vulnerable people.
I have never considered, as a doctor, that death was a good treatment for anything.
Historically, our society has abhorred suicide, and that is based on the principle of the sanctity of life.
It says something for any society, the way in which they look after their most disabled, their most vulnerable, and their elderly. And I do worry, I fundamentally worry, that we are starting down a path that essentially says that those lives of those who are profoundly disabled, who are getting old, who are a burden, are worth less than they are of others. And I think that it's an incredibly dangerous path we go down.
Life is precious, but the virtues in a society that sets it apart as wholesome, decent and ethical are those which nurture and value that life. They are the qualities of tolerance, understanding, forbearance and, dare I say, love, which are so precious commodities. They engender and sustain compassion and ensure a growing humanity, a more civilised society for the living that shields and truly values life.
I oppose this bill because I have fears about the safeguards against the pressures from family members or friends with their own agendas and different priorities. I think there's difficulties over the definition of mental competency. And are we placing too great a responsibility on our doctors to play God?
It's almost impossible to say that people with terminal conditions will not be pushed into a sooner death simply because they have that choice. At the moment, they don't.
And of course, we are all moved and saddened by what we hear and want to act from compassion. But I believe that compassion is misguided if we think that by prematurely ending someone's life, we are alleviating suffering. There are ways to alleviate physical, mental, emotional suffering, and done extremely well in this country. And we hear those in favour of helping someone to commit suicide, that they don't want themselves or their loved ones to die in pain. But that fear should galvanise us to ensure that there is good quality palliative care, and not just from hospices, but across the whole health and social care system.
The Honourable Member promoting this bill says it has a clear procedure with multiple safeguards. What clear procedure? What safeguards?
People would choose this for lots of reasons. The fear of being a burden, the fear of dying, and most of all, the fear of suffering. The responsibility to deal with that lies with us. Who is making them feel a burden? Is it their family? Is it their friends? Is it society?
How is it in our society that our senior members of our society have come to the point where they feel they may be a burden? And I think the increasing secularisation of society has contributed to this, because the Christian principle of honouring your father and mother must to some extent have become weakened if our fathers and mothers and our grandparents begin to be concerned that they are a burden.
I came into this place thinking that I would support the bill, but listening to the speeches of other members of the House, I have to say it has completely changed my mind. And for all those constituents that have got in contact with me over the last few weeks in relation to this issue, I must say to them that listening to this, to the arguments in this place really have levied on my shoulders quite heavily. So after listening to an awful lot of the arguments that have been made today, and from many more people that are much more experienced in this field than I have to say I will be opposing this bill.
We risk engendering a feeling of guilt amongst elderly people and those with serious disabilities that they are a burden on their families, on their carers or on society. And by bringing a Dignitas-style solution to their doorstep, that there is an expectation that it's what's expected of them, it's the most unselfish course of action to take. And as our population lives longer, that pressure will become greater.
I do not believe that Dignitas brings dignity to death. I think it brings a speedier death, and I question the best minds that we have in the world. Is that the best that we can offer?
I am not convinced by the so-called safeguards that are claimed for this bill. I do not believe that it would be enough for us to rely on codes of practice that may or may not be brought in the future. And that's why I have to vote no to what I regard as poor and dangerous legislation.
Any member of this House who doesn't consider that coercion could happen, forcing vulnerable people to feel they need to take their own lives, has perhaps a over-optimistic view of human nature. And I feel that the right to die will very quickly become the obligation to die for the vulnerable people.
This bill says to us, Parliament, decide now, sign this blank cheque, and at some future unknown date, some safeguards may be considered. Members, this is wholly unsatisfactory. That will be too late. The deed will have been done. We will have changed the law. We will have crossed the Rubicon in this country from killing people being illegal to killing people being legal. Members, that is not doing justice. We are here to protect the most vulnerable in our society, not to legislate to kill them. This bill is not merely flawed, it is legally and ethically totally unacceptable, and we must reject it.
The ayes to the right, 118. The noes to the left, 330. The noes have it. The noes have it.